All right, everybody, thanks for joining me. As everybody knows by now, I'm Lane Smith, and we're here doing our MTSP operations microlearning series. Today, we're talking about developing your SLA, the metrics required to ensure success. Um, at the end of the session, I'm going to talk a little bit about the learning management system. And just so you know, this will be recorded and will be put up there in the learning management system. I've got everybody muted, but if you have a question, please feel free to either interrupt or send it in the chat, and we'll get rolling. So, all right. So, what is a service level agreement? I'll answer that question for us. So, basically, it's the level of service expected by customer from a supplier, i.e., everybody on the phone. Laying out the metrics by which that service is measured. And also the remedies or penalties, if any, should the agreed on service levels not be achieved. So that last line there is something I don't recommend that we actually put in any of our agreements. What I found is that for the most part, once you get into the mid-market and enterprise, they're looking for that. But smaller customers are more happy with the relationship, right? So you're going to set a really service level objectives with them. Hey, this is what we plan to achieve. And then if you meet during your monthly or quarterly reviews, if you're not meeting that, then you work through that with the customer. And obviously, if you continue to fail your obligations to them, then they're going to terminate the contract with you. So that would be my recommendation versus putting a penalty in. As soon as you have a penalty, one, you've got to track it, and two, if you word it wrong, you could find yourself obligated to pay the customer regardless of whether they complain. If you miss the SLA, so leave that out of there. All right. So why do we have a service level agreement? Well, first off, we want to set the proper expectations with our customers. Okay. So when we sell the customer, whatever it is we sell them, let's use help desk support as an example. And we say, hey, if you've got a priority issue, you give us a call and we're going to be working on that within 15 minutes. Or, we're monitoring all your servers, and if a server goes down, we're working on that within 5 or 10 minutes, whatever that might be. So that's what you sell the customer. But then when it comes time to actually delivering the services, it's really important to be crystal clear on exactly what that is. Because what your customer heard was anything at all happens, we'll be working on it in 15 minutes, right? But what you actually told them and what you tell them in the SLA is, hey, if it's a priority one, we'll be working on it in 15 minutes. But if somebody sends us in an email and they want us to install an application, or they have some questions, well, that's like a low priority. So we're going to respond to emails next business day. And that's pretty standard. But if we don't set that expectation with the customer, that we don't walk through this with them, I guarantee you'll have a customer that sends you that email on an urgent issue and then calls, 45 minutes later or an hour later, festering, mad and pissed off because you have failed to respond in that 15 minutes like you promised you would, right? It happens to everybody, and I guarantee it will happen to you in the future. So, Aaron, that's never happened to you, has it? Nope. So, all right. Second, we want to prioritize our issues. And, we're trying to provide the best customer service possible. Your techs are doing the same thing, right? They take pride in their job. They want to provide the best service possible. And when you have a handful of customers, or when you're not very busy, even if you have a lot of customers, it's easy to just immediately jump on everything as soon as it comes in and start working on it. But as you start to get busier and busier, you get more employees, you just can't do that anymore. Everybody can't stop what they're doing and jump every time any type of a ticket or any type of issue comes in. They need to start to take a look at it and prioritize it, and then let the commitment that you made with the customer start ticking away and work within that agreed specified time, right? And then a final piece is, always, we want to always continually improve our services. And the only way we can do that is if we've got metrics in place so that we can see, hey, are we always hitting our SLA? Are we almost always? Are we never? Are we blowing our SLA out of the water? Meaning maybe it's too loose, or maybe we've got too many people, or whatever that might be. We want to be able to measure, and that's one of the levers we're going to use when we're hiring people, we're firing people, whatever that might be. So, all right. So what we're going to talk about today is how do we create this SLA, right? So first off, we need to determine, like a priority level for all the issues. Okay, so P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. So we're going to talk about how to do that right now, and that's a big question mark, right? Because every customer comes in, it's critical to them, right? It's urgent to them, no matter what, even if it's like their Word is crashing on their desktop. As far as they're concerned, that's a critical priority one issue. Well, how do you tell them, no, oh, sorry, no, we can't, we're not going to respond to that in 15 minutes because it's really a priority 4 issue. If your techs don't really know how to determine how to create a priority. And so that's what we want to talk through here. And so how do we do that? Well, as you can see right here at the bottom, we determine our priority level by a combination of the impact of the device or technology that's affected and the urgency of it as it compares to the company's business. And we put those together, and that gives us sort of a matrix. And then, we sit down when we're creating the SLA and assign priority levels into all those different boxes, as you'll see. So that way, when your technician comes in, or when a ticket comes in, your technician says, okay, well, what is the impact of this? And then they look at what is the urgency, and that determines the priority level. So it takes the guessing game out of it, okay? And this is something you sit down with the customer, you walk through with them, and you make sure they understand and agree to it as well. All right, so how do we define impact? First off, we look at organization-wide. And this could be termed anything you want. I used to call it widespread. But for the sake of today, we're calling it organization. So basically the idea is you're going to categorize systems, either server systems or applications or network devices or whatever it might be, as devices that affect the whole entire organization, right? So in this example, any systems are not available to more than 50% of the employees, and there's no workaround available. So if that core switch is dead, well, it's organization-wide, okay? However, if the switch that supports, whatever, the East Wing that houses your HR department is dead, is that organization-wide? No, it's not affecting everybody. It's a little bit less, impactful to the organization. It's affecting just that department, okay? What about a team? Let's say you've got a team that's working on a project, and they're leveraging Teams to collaborate, and Teams goes down, and nobody else in the company is really using it. So, that's a team level impact, okay? And then finally, that one person, okay? That one person, individualized, they're single employee affected, and a workaround is available. And what I'll recommend there is, I've always had this idea that what we would do when we went out to a customer that we were selling help desk, let's say we're supporting 20 employees, they've got 20 workstations. As part of our onboarding recommendations for them, we deploy a 21st workstation in that spare cubicle that everybody always seems to have. and set that up. And so if an employee's workstation completely goes dead, they can hop on over to that other system and keep running. So now, obviously, if they're a remote worker, can't really do that. So it might be that, you know, you're individualized, you specify a little bit more. It's like, you know, office employees always have a workaround available. However, remote workers, we might deem them a higher level impact. Okay. Does that make sense what I've gone through? Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, cool. So now we're going to define urgency. Okay, and so critical. So basically, primary critical business functions severely degraded. There might not be a backup. You might not have any redundancy, but definitely for sure, if this is down for too long, the customer's business is going to truly be impacted, right? They're going to lose money. It's going to cost them money. That's critical. Okay. High, you know, you guessed it, a little bit less, right? So something's degraded. Maybe, you know, they have a backup, or there's a redundant system. So maybe that firewall went down and it, the failover kicked in, or hard drives went down on a server and they're all on RAID and they kicked in. So it's a high impact. You need to get to it, but it's certainly not critical because it's not necessarily going to hurt their business, but it just may. Medium, just breaking down a little bit less. Okay, non-critical business function is stopped. So this might be, I don't know, QuickBooks isn't working, but it's a Thursday and their accountant is in on Mondays and Tuesdays, so it's not really that big a deal. However, if it's QuickBooks and it's a Monday, well, maybe that's a high importance because they're trying to get payroll done, or they're trying to get the AR and AP done, whatever that might be. So, and then finally, low. Non-critical business function is degraded and they're fine. And a lot of times what we see is low. We'll put that for like adds, moves, and changes, project work, that type of stuff, right? Requests for group permissions or security permissions or whatever that might be. So now we've got, if you look at this, you've got the technician takes the phone call, or they look at the alert, they assign the impact, they assign the urgency, and then basically they take a look at this matrix that you create ahead of time that says, okay, well, I've got a department level impact and it's medium urgency. So we've got, that's a priority 2, okay? Or whatever it might be. And you'll see at no point in this particular matrix is an individual ever making it to a priority 1. Now you might argue, well, you know what, that we got to treat that CEO special. And sure, okay, so that's fine. You flag that in your system, and so the techs know that all, C-level execs at our customers, we're going to categorize them as a organization-wide impact, and you just set that expectation with your team so they all know, hey, if the CEO calls in and it's our urgency is critical to them, it's a P1. If it's low, well, it's still just a P3. Right? Make sense? So, okay. Now the next thing is, what's the point of calling it a P1 or P2 or P3? And honestly, also, there's usually a P5 that I see, and P5 would be like project work. You still want to track project work, but you don't need it to screw up your reports and your metrics and your gauges and everything. So you might have a P5 that you track for all projects and stuff. All right, so the whole point of creating these priority levels is to tell us how fast we need to do things, pretty much, right? So the very first column here is we're looking at is in progress, and this might be, it might be that you have your technician acknowledge, hey, I have it, So we used to have actually two. We would have an acknowledge and then an in progress. And I dumbed it down a little bit for this session, right? The acknowledge basically means that your dispatch person has it. Okay, they know about it. The in progress would mean when it's assigned to attack and attack is actually starting to work on it. Okay, but for simplification, I just kept it this way here. So here we are, priority one, we're going to commit 15 minutes. We're going to be working on that thing. Okay. Priority two, a little bit longer. Priority three, 2 hours. Priority four, 4 hours. And another thing that we want to look at is how did we define hours? Is it on a 24/7 basis or is it business hours? So for example, if priority four, let's say they send that email in at 4 p.m. and you have your objective is 4 business hours, well, you get an hour, and then the next morning you get 3 more hours. So to meet your SLA, you don't need to respond to that email until 11 a.m. the next day, right? However, if you publish an SLA that's on a 24/7 basis, guess what? It's 4 o'clock. You've got till 8 o'clock that day to respond to that email or you breach your SLA. Okay. The next piece is client update. And this is just as important as the first one. And what we're saying here is we're working on an issue and we're going to stop at least once an hour and shoot an email to the client or give them a call or whatever that might be and let them know that we're still working on it, give them any update they need and keep rolling. And so why do you think we do that? Anybody? No? All right. So we do that because you've acknowledged that you're working on it, but they're over there in their office panicked and you're remote and your technician's sitting there working away, they're doing their best. And the longer it goes, the more that customer's convinced that you're not doing anything because you're not communicating with them. How many times do we hear that, right? So this is that check that forces that, that engineer to stop and communicate with the customer. If you're down for 8 hours and you talk to that customer every single hour, you keep them on the page. Well, yeah, they're going to be frustrated that it's down, but they're going to feel comfortable that you kept them in the loop and they knew what was going on the whole day, and they're going to be happy with your performance, right? Ideally, right? Now, alternatively, if they're down for 8 hours and you still fix the problem, but you don't communicate, what happened during that whole 8 hours, right? They started to get frustrated. They started to get mad. They haven't heard anything from you. Customer satisfaction dives down, and it's much harder to recover from that, the next day when you're doing your rehash with them if you literally went dark for 8 hours on them, okay? So, Jill, did you want to say something? You unmuted there.
Yeah, slip of the finger.
Cool. And then finally, resolution. Now, you'll notice I put on the top here service level objectives, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that first thing I said is that we don't want to agree that no matter what, under a legal binding contract, that we're going to hit these numbers. But also, there really are objectives, right? These are your goals. These are what you want to get done. And resolution is really one that you can never actually commit to. There's no way you can guarantee that you can always fix a P1 issue in 4 hours, right? So do not publish resolution times. However, they're pretty important. Why are they important? For continuous improvement, right? So we're going to monitor, and let's say we've got 3 employees, Jerry and Bob and Jennifer, okay? And Jerry and Bob consistently close stuff in 4 hours. And Jennifer consistently closes stuff in 2 hours. Well, what's going on there? Is Jennifer that much better than those two? Is she not as detail oriented? Is she not solving the problems? Do they need training? What is it, right? But without, some sort of objective, some sort of a goal and a measurement against it, we're not going to have that tool to help us look at how our employees are doing, how fast they're getting the job done. Alternatively, you might have a measure for when people escalate, and you might find that, you know, Bob takes 4 hours to solve problems, but never escalates anything, while Jerry doesn't solve nearly as many problems as Bob, but he escalates it, and because he escalates it through the proper channels, the stuff that comes through Jerry's plate gets solved in 2 hours. So your problem's not Jerry, your problem is Bob is not escalating properly, right? So kind of think about what you want to look at and the actions and the levers that you want to move for your team to make sure that they're all providing this consistent level of service for your customers. Okay. All right, so what now? We've got a method for our employees to identify their priorities, right? Our PSA tools, ConnectWise and TigerPaw and Autotask are tracking our systems now, and what do we want now? We want some dashboards, right? Time to build dashboards. And I just pulled these up. I don't have access to any actual dashboards, so I looked online. Here's a dashboard. I think this is, that's Bright Gauge, right? Here's another dashboard. And actually, here's an equally valuable dashboard as well, because when I glance at this, I can easily see I can as easily see what's going on and what's wrong as I can here, okay? And this is one of the biggest things I see, biggest mistakes I see folks doing in the current times, right? Especially with Bright Gauge. And, you know, Bright Gauge, man, I've got some members that have like 40 or 50 gauges that they're looking at, right? It's just way too much. And so I am going to pick on you guys, and I want you to find if you're looking at this gauge, what are the only 2 things that you really care about if you're trying to make sure you're meeting your SLA? Anyone? Paul? You paying attention?
I am.
Unassigned.
I gave an answer.
There you go. Unassigned. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Jill. Anybody else?
Not acknowledged.
Not acknowledged.
Not acknowledged. There we go. And Kevin's got a suit on today. He is interviewing again. All right,
Got to do
Kevin.
a job interview.
Yeah. Don't tell your boss that. Yeah, so you're right, guys. Not acknowledged today means that it actually means pretty similar to unassigned, right? But that's the problem, okay? And then unassigned's a problem. And all of the rest of this stuff, closed today, well, who really cares, right? Acknowledged today, who cares? Who cares about this trend? All of this stuff is good information, but as far as like a dashboard is concerned, I want that dashboard to really jump out, right? When your technicians are working away, they're not looking at a dashboard. You might have some big screens up there. In fact, I would encourage you to get a screen or 2, but don't do this with it. Put a couple select gauges up there. And my goal always in my NOCs was I would have monitors, and the goal would be for them to be blank. And if I walk into the NOC and I look up and I see something on a monitor, I know we're about to miss our SLA, right? And the techs too would know, hey, we're about to miss our SLA. So we would actually put a sound too. So as soon as something popped up, we'd get like a little buzzer would happen, go off, and everybody in that NOC would know they get at least to glance up and see what's going on. And if they're not focused on something of equal priority, they're going to stop what they're doing and jump on that higher priority issue. Okay. All right. So like I said, focus on what actually matters to the day-to-day, to keeping, that promise that you made to that customer, setting those expectations. That's what you want to focus on for your gauges and your dashboards. All right, so we're going to shift a little bit from just that SLA conversation and kind of broaden it a little bit more now, and talk about what do we want to start to monitor and track, okay? So first off, your service level agreement, obviously, which we've spent a bit of time on now, and customer satisfaction, those are two things that are very important to track. And I'm going to spend some time on those. And the next thing is your efficiencies, so how are you doing against those metrics? And your utilization too is equally important, okay? So like utilization, coverage, do you have enough of the right skill sets in the office at any given time? What are your closure rates looking like? What's your backlog? And so let's take a look at some of these. Okay, we saw this before. That in progress, or like you see, unassigned, or whatever that might be, absolutely should be a gauge or a dashboard. Because if you're about to miss that 15 minutes and you're at the 13-minute mark, you probably want to know about it, okay? Client update, not so much, although you might argue that you want to gauge for that as well. But again, in trying to keep it simple, what I recommend is for the client update ones that and the resolution ones, this is more weekly reporting, and then part of your peer review process. And what I mean by peer review is I always build a team in levels, right? Level 1, 2, and 3, and level 2, they're responsible for looking at what's happening with the level 1 queue, and level 3 are looking at the level 2 queue, and et cetera, right? So that's what I mean by peer review, okay? And you should absolutely have a weekly service meeting where you look at these type of reports and you talk with the techs. And if Bob is always taking 4 hours, have a general conversation with everybody. Why is Bob taking 4 hours? Does Bob need training? Does he need to raise his hand for help more? Does he need to escalate more? Whatever it might be, right? Customer satisfaction. This is another key metric we want to look at. And there's really two measures I look at. So the employees, and this is typically based on something automated with your ticketing system, okay? I'd love to see what people are doing. So if you guys can just put in the chat if you're doing any type of customer satisfaction, that would be useful for me to know. So I'd appreciate that. When I'm looking at customer employee automated tickets, it's easy to think, hey, we're going to send, I see a lot of people do this. Hey, with every time we close the ticket, we have this link to do a customer service survey on it, right? Well, I'll ask you if anybody's doing that, how many people actually click on that link and do that and actually do the survey? Probably not a lot, right? Yeah, there you go. Customer thermometer sends client when a ticket is marked ready to review. All right, so that's great. But if it goes to them every time, it starts to become noise, right? So what you'll find is really a standard and recommendation from Help Desk Institute actually is you only want to pull maybe 20% of your tickets that are going through, because what happens is you actually get a higher response rate if you ask for a survey less times, right? And then also you don't want to ask of a survey for somebody that just did one yesterday, right? You want to give them, hey, let's give them a month and then we'll start to ask them service again. So there's some fine tuning that you want to do with tools like Customer Thermometer, or there's CSAT tools out there to really maximize when you're getting that feedback. The next one is overall customer satisfaction. This is really done an owner to owner basis, or owner to primary contact basis, usually done in your quarterly reviews. You could send it out like a Survey Monkey to all your customers once a year or twice a year, or you could just include it in your quarterly reviews. Personally, I like to do it in quarterly reviews a little bit better, because that way it's a good conversation. And at the same time, what's the one question you always want to ask? Hey, based on how we're doing, would you recommend our services to your peers? And if the answer is yes, then what's the follow-up question? Can we have some referrals, right? Anybody you can think of right now that can use our services, right? We want to use those quarterly reviews to generate more business. And then the final piece on customer satisfaction is just, what's the process? If you have a complaint, if somebody gives you, 3 stars or less, and that's actually where we did it. So 3 stars or less, and we would actually reach out to that customer and call them and say, hey, we saw you left a 3-star review. What can we do better? What was the issue? And really get to the problem, the root cause of that problem. So you want to have a process in place that you explain with the customer what it is and follow through on it. Any questions or comments? Nope. It's going to make me keep talking. Okay. All right. I threw this in here because it's tied to it. Those of you that have gone through the financial class have, we've all talked about technician productivity, but I felt like a lot of the operations managers don't go through the financial class. So what are we talking about here? Technician productivity is what's your utilization, right? What's the magic number we want to hear? Anyone? Throw it out there. 75. Vince, you got it?
I was going to say 100.
100? Yeah. I don't know, Vince, if you can pull that off in Chicago, then yeah, actually, so 75% is about what we want to see. And, when we're looking at, how to price things, that's kind of the metric we look at. If you keep your people at 75% billable, utilized, you're going to be making money with them. You can't actually get them up to 100 unless they're full-time on site at a customer. You can get probably up to about 83, 85% before employee morale starts to go down and you start to lose employees. And I've had that happen on many occasions, right? Where you're bumping, you're thinking, man, this is fantastic. We're at 85%. And you start losing people. You start getting people not wanting to do any after hours project work, and they're just burnt out, right? So there is a balancing act. Now, tag, we want to track it very simple, right? So we're going to track deployed time. And how do we define deployed time? Basically, anytime they're working for a customer. So whether they're traveling to a customer, preparing for a customer job. So let's say they had to do a little research or whatever that might be. And then obviously actually working for the customer, whether remotely or on site, we track that as deployed time. And that's what we want to see is 75% of their time deployed, right? The other time is office time or whatever you want to call it, which is anything at all that's not deployed, okay? So it's training, it's time off, it's vacation, sick days, it's sitting there doing nothing, it's spending time at the water cooler, BSing, right? That's office time. And that's it, right? We're defining deployed versus office. Are they working remote? Right? I don't care. Are they working on site? I don't care. They're still working, right? And if you're following tag practices and you're charging for travel, what's it matter if they're on site or remote as far as your metrics are concerned? It really doesn't, right? So now one of the mistakes I see a lot of folks do is they talk to the employees about that 75% utilization. And in fact, I see it often where they have a bonus structure built around employees getting, 80%. If you can hit 80% utilization a week, you will get whatever, $100 bonus. You hit 85, you get $250. Well, what does that do? Well, it does a few things. One, it puts that pressure on that employee to feel like they always need to be working on a customer issue. And if they're not, they'll tend to fudge the numbers a bit, right? So you might have reports that show, hey, you're 75% utilized, but you're really only 60% or 50% because the technicians don't ever want to put in a report that shows them less than 75. And so what that means, what happens there is you feel like you're at 75, you don't want to get up to that 80, you start looking to hire somebody. Then you hire somebody, now you're at 30% utilization. So don't penalize your employees for the utilization percentage or the deployed time percentage, right? Penalize them for not tracking 100% of their time. And if they work, they come into the work, they meet all the requirements, they're professional, they're doing their job, they're following your processes, they're helping your customers. And that week they spend 25% of their time on deployed time. Fantastic. They did their job. They did exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Now, in that scenario, who didn't do their job? Anybody want to guess?
The dispatcher.
The dispatcher, sure. The sales
The
team.
ops manager.
Yep, ops manager, sales team, right? The company as a whole didn't do their job because the company doesn't have enough business to keep that technician 75% deployed, right? So stop blaming the techs, start blaming the people that can actually make a difference, and that's your sales force and your management team, right? All right. The next one here that I think a lot of us struggle with, in fact, I know a lot of us struggle with, and that's coverage. And for those of you that made it to my class last week, you saw that I had professional services as a full separate, department basically, than support services. And you can get to that when you've got 40, 50 technicians, right? But when you've got 6 or 7, you're not, right? So your professional services guys are also doing help desk. Your help desk guys are also doing professional services. But what's the problem with that, right? Is if you've got an agreement with your customers that says priority 1 issues are going to be handled in 30 minutes, and your level 3 guys are really the only people that can handle the priority 1 issues, but you don't have any level 3 guys, and you can see here, right here, remote level 3 in the morning on Tuesday, you never have the 2 people you need. You're not going to be able, you're much less likely to be able to meet your SLA on Tuesday mornings, okay? Or you can see here, level 1 in the afternoon, you're really having a hard time staffing properly in the afternoon, okay? So this chart's kind of confusing. So I kind of want to pause, see if anybody's got any questions on this concept, but the idea is look at those different levels and, not just, hey, I've got 1 guy on the bench or 2 guys on the bench. Can they actually do what needs to be done if it's coming in? Or are you pulling somebody from a customer site to handle that priority, high priority issue? No questions? Make sense? Cool. All right. So I just wanted to touch on a few more metrics, and some of I've already talked to, but this is an example of a simple dashboard that not really dashboard, but a report that we would look at every Monday morning in our service meeting, right? We would want to see, hey, have we hit our goal for customer satisfaction? Hold times are big. If you're doing internal help desk, hold and abandon rate times are very important. You know, if your customers are expecting you to pick up the phone within 3 minutes and you're consistently at 4 and 5 minutes, that's a problem, right? Or let's say that you set the expectation that you're going to answer the phone within 5 minutes, but you find that people are abandoning in 2 minutes. Well, guess what? Your customers are expecting a lot more out of you than you promised. Okay, so maybe you need to rethink it and say, geez, maybe we should be setting a goal at 2 minutes because nobody's staying on long enough, right? So look at those as the key metrics. Backlog. Okay, this is one I see. Vince talks to me about this one every week, right, Vince? How many open tickets you got? It's great if you know, you got 30 open tickets, and then the next week you're down to 20, and the next week you're down to 10. Well, if your volume of tickets went down every week, well, that's not really that great, right? Because it doesn't mean you actually got ahead. It just means you were slower. And so look at it as a percentage of overall. So if last week you did 100 tickets last week, you want to come in Monday morning with 5 tickets or less is the goal in this example, right? And so when you show up on Monday morning, you look, hey, how many open tickets do we got? If that's 20, 30, 40 tickets, well, you got a problem, right? You've got to figure out what's going on because your team is either not adequately staffed, they're not escalating fast enough, they're taking too long, or whatever that might be, and they're not able to keep up with their workload. Basically, that means they're falling behind, right? So, and then I just, there's our utilization thing. So just a quick example and of some of the metrics that I looked at on a regular basis with my management team on those Monday morning meetings, right? Another thing is also individual metrics. These are typically not something you're going to publish to everybody unless you have to. But when you meet with employees, you do want to have some specific metrics that you track. The on-time one may seem odd. We're used to professional services. Hey, if you get in at 8:30, that's cool because we know you're going to be here till 6. Well, that's not cool if you committed to your customers that as of 8 a.m. you're going to answer their calls within 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. You've got to be on time. So so on time is a very important metric. If you're doing shifts, right? Someone's working 8 to 12, and then you've got someone working 12 to 3 and someone working 3 to 6. If that person, that relief isn't there on time, then that affects everybody. So we want 100% of their time tracked every day. And there's that backlog. I do recommend looking at the backlog for everybody. Okay. And then all tasks updated daily. This is another thing I haven't talked about today, but basically that backlog, if you have a backlog, and you will, I guarantee it, what's happening to that stuff, right? And I kind of take a stance of, like, if it's assigned to you, you have to look at it every single day and do something. And that doesn't mean you push it off to tomorrow again. It means that either you come up with a plan and say, okay, hey, I'm going to work on this next Thursday, and then you put a due date in there, and then you can forget about it until next Thursday. Or if you're waiting on a customer, a lot of people will do that. They'll change it to, hey, we're waiting on a customer. Well, that doesn't mean that you can put it to waiting on a customer and completely forget about it for 3 weeks. It means you put it to waiting on a customer, and the next day, if they haven't got back to you, guess what? You're calling the customer, okay? And I've used the word call. Our technicians, what do they like to do? They like to use email because they don't want to call, right? Email's a crutch. So if you start to see that happen, I don't know how many times I would say in my meetings with the team, right? Pick up the dang phone, right? Don't ever come to a meeting and tell me you emailed the customer 3 times and they haven't responded. Don't do that. You will get fired on the spot, right? Come in, I emailed them, they didn't respond. I called them, I left a voicemail, I emailed them again. That's valid, okay? So pick up the phone. But they need to own that. The whole lesson here is, if your employee is assigned a ticket, They own it. It's not your job to babysit it. It's their job to babysit it, right? All right, so that's it. Before I jump into the learning management, are there any questions on what we went through today? Nope. Okay, cool. Dave, I'm going to see if we can figure out the answer to your question right here on the quiz. So I do want to jump into the learning management system. And if you got an invite last week, or if you didn't get an invite last week, I'll be sending more out today. Please do make an effort to sign into the learning management system. And once you accept the first invite, I'll assign you to the operations manager training plan. And I really want to encourage everybody to go through it. And I'm going to actually walk through it right now with you, just so you can see what I'm talking about. And the reason for this is, you know, TAG, we've put a lot of time and effort into this. Moving forward, we're going to have all of our classware up here. Yes, we are going to start doing live training again later in the year. But even when we do live training, we'll still have recordings up here. We'll have the reference material up here that we've talked through. We'll have quizzes. And so if you hire a new salesperson, a new operations person, and you want them to go through training, you let us know, we assign them the training. And then when they're done and they've taken all the quizzes and they've completed it, they'll get a certification letter that they can present to you. And that's how you know that they've actually gone through the training. So this is going to be a great asset for all of our members. And you first few that are using it right now, I'd really love it if you guys can use it. Give me the feedback we need. I've gotten quite a few. Some of the quizzes are having some problems. So we're going to jump in and I'll show you and we'll see if we can answer Dave Wyman's question, because his quiz wasn't working. All right. So this is the tool. And I showed you guys last week, but we're going to just go right to the operations manager training plan. And once it pulls up, man, come on, there we go. Okay, so this is last week's one, right? And I'm going to take a look at this, and they're all set up like this. And so you've watched the live webinar. Now, last week we do have that up there. If you want to watch it again, you can watch it right here. Okay. We put this checkbox in here so that if you're attending a live webinar or you've watched the video lesson, it does show the progress of the video lesson. But if we don't have it up there and you want to go through, basically all you're saying here is, yep, I did watch, I did watch the class. I watched the webinar. We've got reference material here. So recommended reading from last week, accountability charts is based on the book from Traction. So you can buy, get that from Amazon. There you go. And reference material. So there's a copy of the presentation. And the final piece is the lesson 1 quiz, which I have not passed. I don't know. Continue the last incomplete tip. All right. I wonder if it'll let me redo it. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to do this quiz and we'll see if it breaks. Highlight the coverage gap in this support team. This is actually Matt, because Matt is the manager and he's also level 3. What are all the things to help employees with their training? See, we can cover exam fees, lots of time, require team members. Obviously, we can ask them to do it, but it's hard to require them to train on their own time. Match the term to the definition, right people. Let's see. Right seat. Do they actually get all the ins and outs? They get it. There we go. we go. Let's get that one wrong. There we go. So I passed. I got 83.3%. So I got 5 right. So Dave, I've got no idea why yours is not working. We'll have to figure that out later.
Yes.
So, all right. So that's kind of the beauty of this. And then I go to the next course, and well, so I haven't traded yet. I'm not sure what happened, but oh, there we go. And then I'll go to this one, select that guy, and I'll start taking today's course. And you'll see now today we don't actually have the video lesson, but I can come in here and say, yep, I just listened to Lane. Here's my reference material, not a lot from today. And then here's my quiz. Okay. All right, that is all I have. Do we have any questions at this point?